I'm going to, we have the rating issue. Okay. So basically now we're down to, okay, so we've gotten our mental behavioral rating. We find that actually this individual falls into the moderate category, and we're going to classify each of the 4 domains. So maybe there are a couple of milds and there are a couple of moderates. Overall, it's not marked overall, so that we don't find a Chapter 14 Class 4 marked anywhere. However, there's this issue of integrating, and I've skipped the case law around where we get to the integrating the physical and the psychological. It sounds like people are aware of that. But how do we do that becomes the question. Because obviously, the Chapter 14 gives us a qualitative description, mild, moderate, marked. Those aren't numbers. And obviously 55% is all about numbers. So how do we find a way to bring these together? So if I can pour your book again, please. So basically there are three methodologies. So the Desbien decision, the gentleman with the paraplegia, Justice Spiegel recognized 2, wow, I love how this is, can you do this to mine? This is great, all these tabs. I love it. Justice Spiegel basically recognized that there are 2 methods. And one method is in Chapter 4, Table 2, the mental behavioral chapter. Sorry, the Chapter 3, Table 3, the emotional or behavioral impairments table, which goes from 0% to 14% for mild, moderate, 15 to 19, severe, 30 to 49. This is page 142. Okay. So Justice Spiegel suggests that's one method, but a second method appears Chapter 14, page 301, under comment on lack of percents in this edition. Okay, and you'll see within the first paragraph, reference to the second edition of the guides, where they actually had percentages. And they're broken down to mild, moderate, moderate, severe, severe, moderate, severe, and severe. Okay? So you have 2 sets of methods to use percentages to convert your classification to do the 55% combination. Everyone with me so far? Yeah, okay. So I have a paper that you guys have a copy of, and the title of that is Desbien Rating Comparison. We're comparing the second edition and Chapter 4 rating schemes in applying Desbien, an argument for use of Chapter 4. So the bottom line is that I've gone through carefully to compare the 2 methods, and very clearly, if you want to be internally consistent with this book, then the Chapter 4 method is the appropriate way to go. Okay. However, the case law tells us through the Juggernaut case basically, it tells us, I'll abbreviate. So it tells us a few things. It tells us that very clearly use of the 6th edition, which has brought back percentages, is not appropriate. And I agree with that because, again, you can only get up to 50%. You can't even, so somebody who's catatonic can only be considered 50% impaired. I think most of us would disagree with that. And certainly if you did that catatonic person in Chapter 4, they would clearly make 55%. I think it's much more appropriate. And if you use the second edition, they'd be probably at 90-95%. So Juggernaut has clearly stated, don't use the 6th edition. It's not an appropriate methodology. However, they've also commented on the California method, which is a method that is used in California where they've taken the GAF, the 5th axis of the DSM-4, and basically translated each from 1 to 100 basically, you can go onto a table and see a GAF of 70 equals a California WPI conversion of Y. Okay. So I've argued strongly against this method because the GAF fundamentally is global assessment of functioning, the person as a whole. Chapter 4 is about assessing somebody in 4 distinct domains, and then after you do that, then taking an overall picture. So oftentimes what I'll do is I'll do my GAF after I've really done my 4 domains. Then that could be appropriate for the overall. But now we've been told in the Pistori case that we only need 1 domain at the marked level. GF is not appropriate for that. GF can be radically different from the overall marked domain, right? Agreed? We following? Okay. So we really, and that's basically what this Jagannath is suggesting as well. It's not an appropriate methodology. There's certain assessors, even well-recognized CAD assessors, that continue to use this methodology, but I think it's just really inappropriate to do so. I can't find the exact quotation. Ultimately, Jagannath suggests, though, that a flexible approach is warranted, is appropriate, recognizes that both the Chapter 4 method, that Table 3, as well as the second edition method found on page 301, is also a valid methodology. Use a flexible approach. So what this suggests overall is to do 2 sets of ratings. 1 rating based on Chapter 4, Table 3, and the other based on the second edition as found the percentages on page 301. That way you can't go wrong if the justice decides or arbitrator decides to throw out one or the other. And most are siding with the Chapter 4 approach. But in suggesting that it's appropriate to use a flexible approach, that would suggest, because she's not ruled out the second edition method, I think it really behooves us to present both sets of evidence and let the trier of fact decide, at least until the case law is very clear. In Desbien, what was interesting is that the 1 point of overlap is in the moderate category. So whichever system you used, the 25% was relevant. So it didn't give us any guidance as to which of these 2, but very clearly, Justice Spiegel and Desbien looked at both those 2 methodologies as well.